This was really fun last year to do a talk with SoundGirls. So, to introduce myself, I'm Jenn D'Eugenio. I'm founder of Women in Vinyl, and I'm going to be moderating today with another Women in Vinyl board member, Robin, who's also the new Women in Vinyl podcast co host. Robin, would you like to say hey?
That's me. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our second annual Women in Vinyl panel, answering all of your questions, record related.
Yeah.
For those now, I get to kind of, so that's exciting too.
Robin, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about what you do, and then we'll have our panelists introduce each other, or themselves, not each other.
So I am a record cutter in Canada. I'm the only female record cutter in Canada. I work at the legendary and prolific Lacquer Channel Mastering in the center of Canada, Toronto. Yeah, I'm here to do that in 2019, and it's been rock and roll ever since. And I get to work with the lovely and talented Marianna Hutton, who is joining us on the panel here as well. One of my nearest and dearest, so super exciting. And I, co-host the Vinyl podcast and try and do this kind of stuff anytime I get a chance.
Awesome. And Marianna, why don't you introduce yourself?
Because I named dropped.
Sure. My name is Marianna Hutton. I'm a mixing and mastering engineer, and I also do my mastering at Lacquer Channel. I am, for the most part, on the digital end of mastering, although I do make masters that are going to be cut to vinyl, but I don't cut myself. But I still need to kind of understand the limitations. So I'll be talking about some of those, and yeah, that's my background. I'm also in Toronto, and it's a rainy day in stay-at-home order Toronto right now, so very depressing vibes, but feeling a lot better to be here with you all, talking about the stuff that we love. So yeah.
Awesome. Karen, you want to go next?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Karen Kelleher. I am in Austin, Texas, and I'm the founder and president of Gold Rush Vinyl, which is one of the pressing plants here in North America. My background is actually not at all in vinyl. I was always a collector as a teenager and in college and as I got into my professional career, but previously worked at Google as the head of music partnerships. And my sister and I were band managers and saw kind of that vinyl was on having this huge rise and how difficult it was for indie artists to get it made. And so in 2017, I moved down here to open a brand new factory. So we just crossed 3 years of pressing records and are really excited about all the things that are happening in the vinyl industry.
That's awesome. Congrats on 3 years.
Yeah, we did it. COVID too. No one told me that curveball was coming. So
yeah. Amanda, your turn.
Me? Okay. I am a sales representative at All Media Supply. I'm Amanda Schutzman. I think we have another Amanda in here, yeah? So I should say my last name?
Legendary board member of Women in Vinyl, Amanda McCabe.
There you go. Yeah, so I'm a sales representative at All Media Supply, which is a distributor. It's a one-stop distributor, and I handle record stores all throughout the U.S., but mostly in my region, which is New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Connecticut. And I handle all the orders for incoming stores on new vinyl. Nice. I grew up in a record store. It was my dad's record store on Long Island, and he specialized in a lot of punk and metal. And I just was raised in a record store and kind of stuck to what I knew. And then became a buyer for Generation Records in Manhattan. And I ordered all of their stuff, all their LPs and merch and stuff like that. And then went on to manage a store on Long Island in 2018 when they opened, and then just got this job on a whim. So here I am handling orders for over 100 stores, and I love it like so much. Record stores are the best.
Awesome. Yeah, Amanda was one of our first, or she was our first guest on the Women in Vinyl podcast. So check it out.
Anybody has questions about his vast history in the record department, check out womeninvinyl.com and listen to episode 1.
So you guys sort of gave us your intro into vinyl, but maybe tell everybody what a day in the life is like. Who wants to start?
Marianna, why don't you start?
We can't hear you. You're
Oh,
muted.
you're muted.
Sorry, I muted myself and forgot. So I work in many environments, so a day in the life for me may change a lot from one day to the other. So, like for instance, 2 weeks ago, I recorded 2 virtual festivals and mixed them, and had to master them to be, to be played through YouTube and other video streaming services. So I had to take that into account. So a day in the life for that was wake up very early, get all the gear ready, and get that done. And then the next day, mix as fast as possible because the video needs to be edited to the music. And then after that, last week was more of a mixing and mastering week, like my average week, where like I have tracks to mix for an artist, and sometimes I get some weeks I get more tracks to master than others. I find that this month has been quite slow, and I think it's because of a general feel of a general low energy that is hanging over this field. The majority of my clientele comes from Ontario, and I think that the vibes have been fairly low energy as of late, as we enter, as we surpass a year of being in lockdown, essentially. We're pretty tired, and I feel in terms of the amount of work that I get. But anyway, so yeah, it's been days depend on the kind of work that I get, because I do work with a lot of different stuff. And back before COVID, I was also the main engineer at a studio, and it's currently closed because of the COVID measures. So lately it's been like pretty much only like mixing and mastering and that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a day in the life for me. Changes every day, every week. And yeah.
How many projects are you typically working on at a time?
Well, that's a good question. So, when it comes to mastering, it's very like go in, get it done, leave. Like there is the odd revision here and there, but it's pretty much like work comes in, master gets done, it's delivered, done. It's mixing that it has a lot of, it's mixing that I usually do a bunch of things at the same time, because the process is a lot like you send the mix to the artist has opinions about that, wants changes, and then you go back and make those changes. So I can't stop everything to only be working on a mix. Otherwise, I either go crazy or my income would be very low, because it's like, I have to take from more than one person at the same time. But mastering is the only one that's pretty much like one at a time. Like this gets done and then the other one comes in, kind of thing.
And do you find that you're doing a lot of mastering for vinyl now, or the same or more so than before?
It has gone up. Like I always ask now if they plan on release through vinyl, and it's like if they tell me right away, if they tell me right from the get-go, then I do make 2 separate versions, one for streaming and another one for vinyl. But if it's something that like 5 months later or something, they're like, oh, you remember that thing that you mastered? Like, I want to make it for vinyl now. And if I'm going to do the digital version for it, digital file to be made into vinyl, then I do charge a bit more, because it's like, I have to re-listen to the record again, essentially, right? I have to go from scratch in that sense,
Right.
So I do charge a fee. But if they tell me from the get-go, I just do it. It's like an extra step, but it's done along with the other versions. So,
right.
Yeah. But it has gone up in the past few years. I think there's more and more. It's just something I always ask now. When before it wasn't something that I needed to ask, I have noticed that it has gone up with time. for sure.
Yeah. And Karen, what about you? What is a day in the life like for you these days?
Oh boy. Changes a lot. I'll tell you one thing that I've learned about myself is that my days are much more successful when I get up earlier, which I'm a night owl, but I think the lack of shows in the past year has taught me that there's value in getting up early. I always try to work out or at least walk a couple miles in the morning just to get my head clear and then head in. I'm most successful when I also divide my week up kind of in themes for the days. So Mondays, I tend to do finances because as the CEO of the company, my job is really to not only set the strategy and make sure the financial health of the business is there, but also to manage the staff and make sure that, what's being put in front of our clients and then their fans is of the quality we want. So I tend to spend Mondays working on financials because I hate that stuff. It's not what I like to do, but it's probably most important. So I try to get it out of the way at the beginning of the week. As well as production planning. I do a lot of my team meetings on Mondays with my various shift leaders and sales team. Tuesdays, I tend to do a lot of supply chain work, looking around to see, especially during COVID, where our vinyl supply chain has been very disrupted. What backup plans do we have? Contingency planning. I'd say a big portion of my job as the leader of the company is planning for the worst case scenario always, so that if something happens, we're prepared and have a cool and level head about us. Wednesdays, I like to do all creative work with my team. Thursdays, I do a lot of one-on-one team meetings and give each employee time to come in and sit with me and share ideas or feedback that they have. And Friday, we're getting ready to just do it all again, looking at our production schedule to see if we're on track for projects that we've communicated to our clients, how the machine performance went, how we did with sales, and to just keep an eye on that so that week over week, we can measure ourselves and see where we're at in terms of client expectations, what we need to accomplish as a business in order to keep the lights on, and then what we want to do in the future to make sure that we can continue to grow the factory and all what we want to do here.
Yeah.
How far are you guys booked out now, Karen?
We're out about 16 weeks right now, which is a lot longer. We used to be at 6 weeks. And just supply chain issue after supply chain issue, plus the growing demand, which I'm sure we'll get into in this conversation, it's just been booming. So many artists have been relying on vinyl to be kind of the economic engine for their careers this year, absent live shows. And it's really something our team thinks a lot about is like, how do we show up? And as much as we're dealing with things like plastic is delayed or we can't get machine parts from Canada or Europe because of COVID shutdowns there, how can we best help our clients make more money from vinyl? So a lot more, I think my routine has been very disrupted this year by every week I wake up and I'm like, what country's closed now? Okay, well, how are we doing with cases? And, making sure my staff are healthy too.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you, Amanda? What's your day-to-day?
Ooh, it's different every day, but now that I'm a sales rep, I've been a sales rep for about 6 months and I've never worked from home before. So this is definitely new for me, being home Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, answering phone calls all day, talking to stores is all very, very new. And Zoom is super new. And now I've been on Zoom all day today, which is awesome. Thank you, COVID. But I was up at 3 a.m. yesterday to do a record show. Usually every weekend before COVID, I would be doing record shows with my father. So I'd get up at like 3 a.m. and lift 50 boxes into a VFW hall and people would shop all day and I just sell records and hang out, load it all in the van, come home. Saturdays and Sundays, now that I'm doing this 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, I do all the orders with Needle and Groove and Generation over the weekends and work in a store and help the staff out any way I can at night. So it is 7 days a week for me. I'm in the stores on the weekends, and then Monday through Friday, I'm dealing with stores from home.
What would you say is advice for someone who may be getting into this to not get burnt out when you're, juggling sort of multiple roles and maybe working from home? What advice would you have in that area?
I mean, I wouldn't be the best person to ask considering I'm totally burnt out. But I think I love what I do. And who worked at Google here? Who was it? Because you're my hero and you run my life. Google runs my whole life. My Google Calendar, my Google Tasks, like it runs every store. And I can basically keep track of what a store is selling. They just type it in there, Google Keep, and it pops up on my screen, and I know to reorder it. And that's basically how I run Needle and Groove all day from home. But I think just kind of make a list for yourself, schedule things correctly, and you won't get too burnt out if you love it. You know, it's always something to get up and want to do.
Question from some of our and so specific question. In mastering and prep changed the 80s. I mean, you weren't even really around in the 80s, so that might be a hard question for you to answer. Take a stab at it, won't you?
For who is the question?
It's in what ways has vinyl mastering and prep changed since the 80s?
I wouldn't know. I was not in the carts. I wasn't even in the carts like in the 80s, but I mean through experience, and also through the fact that I'm not in the fabrication of vinyl. So I'll pass that question to somebody more knowledgeable than me.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard for all of us to speak.
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s, but definitely wasn't mastering anything.
Yeah.
I mean,
well,
prepping it, like 80s stuff was coming from tape. I mean,
oh yeah, for sure. And I think that, so this is more of a general thing. It wouldn't be only for vinyl, but I think that back then, and I've had this discussion with some of my mentors, I get the impression, and correct me in the chat for those who were working around in the 80s, if this assumption is true. I have the impression that in the 80s, there was the process of delivering any work was way quicker. One, because a lot of it was done through tape, so you didn't have the opportunity of re-edit and make so many changes. And because also the label was more in control of artists' careers, which means that they had very strict deadlines that needed to be, obeyed for releases. Like if you're releasing something physically, there's a lot of planning that needs to be done in terms of, packaging, distribution, and all that stuff. And nowadays you just have to plan maybe 2 weeks ahead of a release to, send the pre-save links and all that stuff, right? So it's like an artist can literally keep working on something forever and ever and ever, and just, release it whenever they kind of feel like it. And another assumption that I have that the 80s was probably like is that because there was a lot of subdivision and labor and everybody that worked in the music industry, you had the manager, you had the A&R, you had like all of these very like precise people who were very knowledgeable in their sectors of the industry. There was less back and forth in terms of decisions that need to be made in terms of with the artists themselves. Like I find that a lot of my time is spent trying to communicate things to the artists that they don't understand because they're doing all of these things by themselves, And yes, you do have artists that have more business knowledge than other ones, but generally speaking, I get the impression that if I was around in the 80s, there would be less talking and more doing. That's just me.
No email in the 80s, so they couldn't pepper you with emails and ask you nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
Teleport me back. Please.
Yeah.
We have a question in here about how does one effectively market and sell an independent vinyl production. I think maybe we could sort of have everybody talk about advice they would give to an independent artist on each part of their sort of take on the industry, maybe from pressing, distribution, and how that, any advice, I guess, that you have.
Yeah, I'll start on the pressing side. A couple pieces of advice, and I've worked with hundreds of indie artists on their releases. My factory pretty much only works with independent artists who are largely controlling everything in their career. And I have so much respect for anybody who's undertaking that. I think the first thing is to understand kind of what your goals are with the project. Financially, especially, look at the upside of what you think you can sell when you're planning and producing vinyl. There is economies of scale, we call it in vinyl, where the more you order, the cheaper it gets per unit. So a lot of people need to consider that when they think about quantity. Also understanding what's most important to you around turnaround time, quality, and pricing, and making sure you understand the trade-offs there. It's frustrating for me when I personally buy vinyl and it's poor quality, because I think, man, that's like the artist's like culmination of all of this time in the studio and all of this planning and artwork and things, and just at the finish line it didn't quite hit. So make sure you understand which trade-offs you're willing to make. Lately, because of what's been happening with all of the supply chain issues we're seeing in COVID, I've also been strongly encouraging, and I think Jen, you as well would do this with your clients, not to put pre-sales up until your vinyl is in production and you've got a test press done. It's really, I feel for our customers that put pre-sales up, they were so excited about the vinyl, and now it's been 20 weeks, 25 weeks, and you have customer service issues to deal with your fans. So be thoughtful about that. It can be such a hard thing when you want to announce you have a record coming and you want to get the money in to help with the sales, but do try to balance that so that you're getting your fans really excited about the release. And then make sure people know about it. I see a lot of times on release day, people will just put up that, the pixel thumbnail of the album art and say, my album's out on Spotify and vinyl. Like, make sure you give the vinyl release enough breathing room on your social media channels, your email newsletter, on Bandcamp, so that people understand that it's there for purchase and it's not just getting lost in the shuffle of your release day.
Yeah, that's really good advice. I mean,
You
PPC
find
delays, it's crazy.
Totally.
Yeah.
Karen, what's been happening with COVID, people had like a idea of what their dream release would be and whether it was like a splatter effect, and you've had to kind of them back to get it met.
Yeah, I think for us, we don't do splatter so much, but we'll do different color combinations. I think people have just, some people have had to be flexible with us because plastic has been held up. There's shipping container delays all across North America right now. And so we have had to ask some clients, hey, are you flexible? And in fact, I know you wanted a solid color. Could we do one better and do a hand pour for you? Or would you be cool with a random mix and we'll discount it a little bit? Just things that we can do to get creative. I have so much admiration for our press operators. They often come to me and say, hey, I know the client ordered this one color, but we think that another color might look better with the packaging. Do you want to suggest that to them? In a lot of cases, that can help us too, to get product out the door more quickly while we're waiting on, materials to arrive.
That's awesome.
Amanda, what can you sort of add to that from being in a record store and distribution?
I also just saw like a question come in that kind of all works with it. I think you're gonna laugh, but I think that the whole street team vibe of going in with a freshly pressed record of yours as a local or independent artist, go to your record stores and just drop off copies. Just drop them off. Like I love to sell local stuff at the store. So promotion is one thing, obviously get it up and share it and make people interested and stuff like that. But I've sold so many local artists just on word of mouth alone, going to your record stores and kind of geeking out with the kid behind the counter about your band is the best way to get it out there.
Awesome. So what advice would you give a woman who wants to get into the field, but whose main experience thus far has been as a collector? How do you get involved in this work without having to first go through spending thousands on a post-secondary degree? I think we all sort of have an interesting journey here. So, Karen, you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I will, because I'm somebody who did spend a lot of money on a post-secondary degree and found that I had to hustle my own opportunity even then. So it wasn't a guarantee that having I went and got my MBA, that was going to help me in the music industry. Advice I give a lot of people who want to get into the space but don't have formal experience is that's okay, because so many musicians need help marketing their music, right? And there are so many opportunities for you to jump in and get your feet wet and create opportunities for yourself to start building credibility and show that your passion for vinyl is not just as a collector, but that you have an interest in the industry. Being passionate about music is different than working in the industry. And in fact, I would say a lot of my love of music has diminished having worked in the industry for so long. So you have to, balance that trade-off. But maybe there's an artist that you really like who's putting vinyl out and needs help in the street team kind of capacity or making connections. That's one option. That's what I did. I'd never been a band manager. I just kind of learned and went with it. I've never been in a vinyl factory before starting this one, but asked a lot of questions. And I think one of the things too that helped me to break into this industry was not being afraid to pick up the phone and call people who have worked in the industry and ask them for their advice. And to be direct about that. Don't say, I want to pick your brain. Say, I want to get into this space. Here's my, reason. Can I take 15 minutes of your time? Or where would you point me? Learn from other people who've gone through it, and especially resources like what Women in Vinyl are doing with the podcast and blog to start finding people who could help you navigate that.
Yeah, I'm completely untrained. No schooling whatsoever. I was offered every single job that I have right now. I'm working 4 different jobs. And it was just because someone asked me to. And I enjoyed it and I wanted to learn about it. So if you're trying to get into just talk to someone who's doing something that you'd like to do and learn more. It's the best way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, Rochelle, like, you also need to kind of like drill down into what part of talking about, because when you look at how many a record, you're looking at, arguably 25 to 50 people to make a record. So you need to figure out what part of the process you want, because maybe being a pressing plant operator is maybe your total jam, and maybe it's being a sales rep, maybe customer representative at a, maybe it's making cover art, like a million different ways to do every single part of this. So schooling, and maybe that's audio school. I didn't go to audio school and I cut records. So, my path wasn't everybody's path, but it worked for me. So it's very much like find a heartbeat and then go, dealer's choice, man. Like, there's room for everybody. You just need to figure out like what part of it you like. And then it's like the paint swatches. So you're like, oh, that's purple, but maybe this one. Then you can like figure out like actually does that one thing, and then go after them and be like, hey, and then usually pay attention and we answer your questions. So
yeah,
that's great advice.
Yeah, I went to school for textiles, so it's completely different. I was learning to weave, so I would say that's, the point of Women in Vinyl really is to sort of create a space. So if you are reading about these different career paths and you find someone that you feel has sort of had an entryway or would be a good person for you to connect with, usually their social media and everything is at the bottom of that post for you to reach out. And I would say like every single person that I've ever reached out to has been more than willing to give advice. It's a very collaborative industry, I have to say, at least from my experience. So
I guess the entry point is always going to be the band. That's like the first step of any kind of music, right? Talk to your band or talk to local, what, or maybe you like classical music, something like that, but like that's where it starts. So and the artist, then there's like management, then there's like record, then there's mixing, mastering, there's NR, there's working at a label, there's so like we can't give you the roadmap because everybody has a different way of getting the different things. So
and if you are looking for
point is everybody else's.
Yeah, and I think if you are looking for specific postings or things like that, like if you're following people on LinkedIn, I think that's a good, like following companies, you can get alerts that way, or I think A2IM has a good job board. So there's some resources like that we can kind of pull together too to share in that way.
And if you're interested in working in a record store, just apply to work in a record store because they will hire you because they need help.
Yeah,
most likely. That's how I got my job. They asked me to cover a shift, and then someone quit, and then a month later, someone else quit. And then I was doing 3 jobs in this store, and then I became the buyer, and then I left that store to become the manager of another store because people just need help. So if you're willing to learn and you're willing to work, they will find work for you. I promise. Just go apply to your favorite record shop. Say, hey, if you're ever looking for someone, keep me in mind. Just become friends with people, get to know, the feel of everything, and decide what you want to do. And I promise there'll be someone to train you.
Great question.
Yeah, and we have someone asking, how have vinyl sales been during the pandemic? And maybe we can sort of tie that into what the current landscape is like.
I actually pulled up some numbers for reference.
Oh, wow.
So to close first, and this is American, there were 684 sold to close out the. That's up 221% over the same week last year.
Oh.
To date is now 0.21 million, up 74% versus 2020.
Well,
Could you also share those in the chat, Robin?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sales have been booming, just from the store side and the distributor side as well. I'm still super new. I came in during like Record Store Day, Black Friday last year in November. So I don't know the larger scale really, but I know just from the record store, a small store, we had more of a turnout on Record Store Day during COVID than we ever did before. And I think it's because people are home and they have more time on their hands and they want to buy records.
Yeah.
So booming.
And we have a question from Scott Wolf who says, your thoughts on the future of vinyl and or music, but in this case, vinyl, with everything that's going on now and that boom, do you feel like it's going to continue to uptick in this way? Do you think, what are sort of your thoughts there?
I don't know. Records have been around forever. I'm a product of being in a record store my entire life. So there'll always be collectors, whether it'll be such a widespread sort of novelty phenomenon where everyone's going out and buying a record. I'm not sure, but there's always going to be record collectors. I don't know if it'll be pressed the way it's being pressed right now, or it's such a backlog, like everyone wants their stuff out on record and that's the way to buy it and that's the way to hear it. I don't know if that'll live forever, but I know record collectors who've been collecting for 70 years and they have no intention of stopping. And those people will always be around. Jen's going to be an old lady talking to you about Black Sabbath and the old days. I know it.
Karen, what about you from a pressing plant perspective?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see the same like trajectory of growth that we saw during COVID, but I do think that, one reflection I have is I don't get asked if vinyl's a fad anymore. Like when I first went out and did fundraising to get banks to give me money to start a factory, the amount of people who were like, vinyl records, are you kidding me? No, I don't get asked that anymore. In fact, people come knocking on the door and say, we want to get into the vinyl game. So I think that's a really good sign. One thing from an indie artist perspective that makes me nervous is we've now gone a whole year with independent artists lost a ton of their revenue from not touring. And, initially vinyl was helping them get through that. And I'm curious to see how that plays out now that artists have been kind of without that source of income, whether it's as easy for them to make vinyl or not. I do think with shows coming back in a force, I'm getting so many show alerts now that are on the books for late 2021 that I hope that people need more vinyl to go out on the road. That would be a really good sign. The other thing I think a lot about too is these young buyers who are, 13 to 21, who are buying, starter record players and might not even own a record player, but are buying to be a collector and are first like enjoying the medium and the artwork. How do we keep those younger buyers engaged and educate them on how to become a better record collector? Not that it's not a good thing to just collect and not listen. I collected records for almost 10 years before I bought a record player. But I think there's a lot of opportunity in introducing these newer people who aren't going to go out and buy a very expensive turntable at the start, how to grow into being more of a part of the vinyl community.
Mm-hmm.
The answer is the Women in Vinyl podcast. That's the answer.
Tune in.
Shameless plug.
I am all about shameless self-promotion.
I will say,
I do have a question for you, Karen.
what's that?
Are you finding that, I guess, and this is a little bit self-serving too, but are you finding that bands and artists are asking you for lower quality, like lower quantity than like your minimum?
You know what? I think actually at the start, one of the reasons we got stuck in a backlog is people put in initial orders and then came back and said, hey, just kidding. We sold through that too fast and we're tripling our order size.
Okay. That's amazing.
We were planning against, I have a sales capacity. I can only sell so many records a month with how fast the machines go. So that kind of threw us off. Yep. So we have seen order sizes going up for indie artists, which is a good sign. I think that, if you can get people to move from 300 to 500 and get more savvy at it, partly because they're getting better at marketing the vinyl, but also because there are more vinyl buyers in the market, that's a great sign.
Totally. I think we answered Steve's question there too. So where do we see vinyl going? Is it here to stay or just a novelty? Well,
Here to stay.
I'm staying, Steve.
I think we're also like, all of us are hoping and praying that it continues to be a thing because we'll all be out of a job if it doesn't continue to be a thing. So, I mean, please, Steve, propagate. Thank you.
I'll be interested to see too, after a year of being on the computer and being so digitally connected, how people react to going back out into the world and collecting things. I think that's part of why vinyl's been interesting to a lot of friends of mine, is they've been stuck in their homes a lot more than they thought they would, right? And working from home like Amanda's been for the first time, right? And so they're looking around their spaces and saying, should probably get a record player or invest in vinyl. That's kind of a neat, reaction to how much we've been digitally connected for a year.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely does give you that tangible format of, right? Like that artist that you're obsessed with, like, that's like,
yeah, I think that's an incentive for younger kids too. It's packaged, you got the nice pretty record and you can hold it in your hands and look at the artwork, and you also, it comes packaged with a digital download. So you can buy it and then you can listen to it on your phone and you have the best of both worlds right there.
You can take it with you. And maybe it even has a signature on it or something. Or a fake signature if you bought the WAP record. Like, whatever.
I don't think I've ever used my digital download codes any single time I've gone, but I should.
Neither.
They're free. Only I've ever used one.
That's crazy. All right. Let's see. We got some. After interviewing numerous record collectors over the last year, including Jenn, we had a mixed response regarding Record Store Day and what collectors thought about it and how important that day is to collectors. Be interested to hear thoughts on Record Store Day from you all from a point of view of distributors, pressing plant staff, and buyers. Amanda, do you want to start with that one?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, I'm coming from the distributor side. I'm coming from the record store staff side. I'm coming from the collector side. I just do a whole lot of things.
Yeah, you do.
From the distributor side, if I could be honest, the list dropped 2 days ago and I already want to die. I can't deal with it. There's 400 titles. There's so many cool things to remember and who needs to order what. And it's just very overwhelming. I think from a distributor side, it's exciting, but at the same time, it's just really overwhelming to get these lists out to stores and make sure you get your orders in on time and make sure the stores get what they want in the quantities that they want them to make their customers happy.
Right.
Record Store Day means stress. But from a collecting side, I love it.
Do you find that it's more stressful because you've got two dates?
No, honestly, I think for stores, I think it's great to have days separated. I think it's June 12th and July 17th, Saturdays. I think it's better for stores to not have to, it's a lot for stores to order. It's a lot of money to put into one day, even if you are guaranteed to make it back. Some shops are small and an $8,000 order is a lot. So to be able to split it up into 2 months and not make it 16,000 would be helpful.
Right.
So I think for stores, it's great to have it broken up a bit. And even for collectors, it's money out of your own pocket. So if you want 5 titles coming out that day, that's $200 you got to spend. going each time and stuff. I think it's good that they split it up, especially with the list being as long as it is.
Yeah, I think some of the negativity probably comes from the flipper side of things versus the actual record store day itself, as far
Yeah,
as
if you
collector
want to hear me
community.
rant, we could talk about that.
I mean, always.
Stop buying 10
Girls
copies
after
of something,
her.
put it online, guys. It's not right.
Karen, what about how has RS kind of morphed your world?
You know, I think a lot of artists think about it too late and then come to us and want us to pull off a miracle to get it done in time. And that's hard because you don't want to say no, but also want to be respectful to the client and to the stores and not create a ton of commotion. You know, as a fan, I live in walking distance to Waterloo Records here in Austin, and I just think it's awesome to watch people lining up and sleeping there overnight and getting to know each other, and just how diverse a group of people it is that show up for Record Store Day. It's like such a special moment for the vinyl community that we get, you know, everybody, you know, to hit the stores at the same time and to recognize the value of the record stores. It's where I started collecting and learning, and I just, it really just makes me feel so good to walk by it and see the line and see how many young kids are there too with their parents or grandparents. And I think that piece of it is really special regardless of the kind of business side of it.
Yeah.
Marianna, your work experienced the crush of Record Day from mastering?
Sorry, it was cutting off. I couldn't quite understand the message.
Sorry. Has Record Store Day, have you felt the rush of Record Store Day yet compared to like with the master?
Not really, not for me. Like, yeah, I haven't felt an effect for it. I mean, it's because generally, like, you're pushed back against the wall when you master, just generally speaking. So it's like I can't tell the difference because it's just always that way. It's just always like, I need it by tomorrow, by today, by right now, you know?
Now,
like,
now.
because you're like at the very end, like so
Right.
it's or almost at the very end. I guess you, Robin, Kevin, would be like at the very end, right? But like, yeah, like the pressure of like having things out are just always there no matter what.
Right.
So I don't really notice any specific difference from Record Store Day from my perspective. Yeah, just always rush. Yeah.
Full on all the time. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Jen, do you got another question lined up?
Well, it looks like we have one. It says, let's see. As Instagram users, what are your thoughts on sharing your record collections on the platform? And do you find there are any negatives within the vinyl community that need addressing?
I post records all the time on Instagram. I love records. I love my records. Don't care necessarily if you like my records. But I'm going to post pretty pictures of them, and I enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think people on Instagram have been really cool. I meet all sorts of people from all over, people I never would have talked to in my whole life, and found stores on Instagram like, oh, I need to go visit this store. They have this and they have this, and I'm going. I'm definitely going. I think Instagram's been great. People ship me records from Spain. I'm shipping records to some dude in Sweden. We all love the same stuff, and you can keep in contact with people and geek out, and I enjoy it. Post your records on Instagram.
Yeah,
do it.
You'll make friends.
You will make friends.
Have there been any positives or negatives from like a pressing perspective? Like, do you get a lot of people, Karen, that see things on Instagram and they're like, they want these crazy effects? Or
We have had to be careful about that when we show off something that was like a one-off or a oopsie, then people want us to reproduce that over and over again. More than that, we have to be careful and thoughtful about making sure that if we put a client's pressing on social, that we're approved to do it and we're not spoiling something for them, that we're not going out first with it before they get to post it to their fans. One thing that's interesting, at least for us, is 90% of our followers across all social media is women and younger women. And we get asked a lot to just show the process and explain how records are made. So the probably number one question we get asked on social media isn't anything about showing off the records, but like, how does it magically get onto the vinyl disc? Like, what is that crazy science? But it is nice for us to have social media as an ability to be like a lookbook and show off the scope of the work.
Right.
I mean, I guess I have to say the only thing of a drawback in the community is like, yeah, people talking stuff that you don't want to hear. Like, it's my collection first, and I mean, I get a lot putting up enough records that I own, and it's just the right. And I'm like, well, I mean, yes, I'm a collector, but ever. And I mean, there's a little bit of, I mean, dirty underbelly of Instagram is always be in your DMs or somebody weighing in on the way that you choose to not show your feet, or you show your feet, or you a record in a strategic way that hides part of your body parts that maybe somebody wants to see more of. I mean, that's kind of the race that we run as female and forming people. You know, there was going to be some sort of a expectation or stereotype or whatever put onto you as a person on the internet. So, I mean,
yeah, I mean, I think you always have the trolls, right? I mean, I've had plenty of negative comments on things saying that it's, you know, my fiance's collection and not mine or whatever. And, you know, just I've been called names because I liked a certain record label, or I don't deserve to listen to so-and-so's record. It's just, but, you know, like, who, I don't care. Like, if you're going to say that kind of stuff to me, like, it's not worth my time, because you're clearly not reading what I'm posting and looking at the rest of what I have. And so, yeah, I mean, just ignore it.
Yeah. I think a question that's kind of the old internets. What are you gonna do?
Right.
The benefits far outweigh the negatives so far, I think.
Yeah, I mean, a meme on Instagram is part of what started Women in Vinyl, so.
Yeah. I mean, sharing my collection is the only reason that I had Instagram to be. Viva la. Let's see. There's a growing smaller vinyl that's more user-friendly for artists who released music on vinyl before. Yeah. And thoughts about crates, Karen? Thoughts about crates? Let's talk about crates so that I don't rant about crates.
You know, I really respect their user interface and the design and the ability for people to kind of plot out and see what the vinyl is going to look like. I think that's a big piece we hear about why people get excited, is like it's starting to come to life on there. You know, one of the frustrations I have, if I'm being honest with you, about some of these services is that they're brokers on top of brokers, and the further you get away from the pressing plant side of it, a lot more things can happen. One of the reasons I started my plant was because I didn't know that a record I had put into production for one of my bands when I was a manager went through 2 different brokers, and they, you know, the band had very strict, you know, wants around where it was manufactured and how, and it was so far out of our control that when there were errors with it, for example, a whole half a song got cut off, there wasn't a lot of ability for us to push back on that because there were so many people in the middle. So that's just one thing I'd make people aware of is, you know, when you order through services, try to understand, again, those trade-offs I've mentioned before between turn time, quality, and price, that you understand what you're getting. But that said, I mean, there's such a demand for vinyl right now, and I'm seeing so many startups pop up that want to get into this space. And the more people are pushing the envelope for us as an industry about how to make a better user experience for it, how to help first-time vinyl buyers get into the game, the more I think it's going to keep all the pressing plants in particular on our toes and make us work harder.
It's true. There still needs to be that education moment for people to understand that there's only so many people that actually cut those records.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's a huge problem from my perspective. And I mean, that's a bottleneck that is kind of shrouded in mystery, as is mastering, but people don't understand that those brokers, I mean, anybody can say that they run a pressing plant or they have a pressing plant, but where did the lac come from? Or, you know, is it cut?
Was it even a lacquer?
Exactly. Is
Yeah.
it being cut to metal? Like, who's
Yeah.
actually transferring your music into a master form? And like, yeah, is it a broker situation? Because like,
Yeah.
I mean, Scott Hall is like, I love Scott Hall, and he always says like the best information, like the best conversation that you're ever going to have is with the person that actually masters and cuts your record, and then, you know, deal with the process from there. But like, if there's one thing to make sure that you're actually nailing, like that's the conversation right there. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's going to end my rant before I start ranting. But
Can I add a throw-in question on that, Robin?
please do.
At the beginning, I mean, it feels like ages ago now that we had the Apollo lacquer fire, and everybody thought that lacquers were, the whole industry was going to implode. Like, how has it been on y'all's side with lacquer supply?
I mean, I can only speak secondhand, but it's a growing concern all of the time. I mean, there's only so much that MDC can do. And I mean, with all of the people investing in pressing, I think that's fine. But I think as an industry, we need to come up with the actual or new formula or something, because the only way to in this growth that we've got is to create lacquer. And I mean, I don't know if it's like a percentage of every single plant or something that needs to like throw in, because it's got to be destructive testing, and it's got to be some sort of chemical engineering master plan, but something needs to happen that way, because those supplies are dwindling. And it's not just the lacquers, but it was like they had styli too, right? So like, you're talking about replacing sapphires and diamonds and things like that. I mean, you know, a lot of these machines, 50 and 60 years, many of them, it's people don't understand that that's a very like fragile part of this upside down pyramid that we've got going, and put on those very talented group of individuals cut those records. I mean, yeah, it's a drought. It's an impending drought, and it just seems like there's trickles every now and again, but there's boxes on eBay, like random posts about boxes of lacquers, and it's kind of just like, you know, if there's definitely like a shady underbelly / black market of lacquers.
But I think that even goes to show, kind of back to the topic on like how to get into the industry, like we need innovation. So everybody needs to get involved in a way. You know, if you have ideas on this kind of stuff, like go at it. So
that innovation is definitely the game. Like there's a new record cutting lathe that's out on the scene today, but you know, if you can't get lacquers for it, then it's, you know, just a really sexy paperweight. So I mean
so from getting people into vinyl, we have a question on what are our best tips, products for cleaning your vinyl and needles, stylus.
I use just a regular brush and solution for records. I'm kind of old school. I also kind of poor and can't afford like $1,000 VPI to clean my records. So
I would love one,
I mean, I'm sure you could get, you know, you could get a cheaper one. I think they have like Okinokis and the spin cleans, and there's options to clean your vinyl that you don't have to do it by hand. But honestly, just get a record brush and some solution, which is, you could make your own solution, but buying bottles of solution, you probably get them at your local record store. A lot of record stores sell supplies. You could get it there, and an anti-static brush and stuff like that. I'm not the equipment guy though, so I do just kind of clean records.
Yeah, I use Groove Washer.
Yeah. It really is. It's like 95% distilled water and like 5% alcohol. I mean, it's really not, it's just, you could make your own. But if you don't want to do that, just go to your local record store.
That's a great ways. Lots of good products out there. I mean, I try and stay away from the wood. That was a dangerous operation. I caution away from that one. It's not as sexy as it wanted to be. But it was a good experiment. I'll give you that one. Maybe we'll do it on YouTube for a what not to do.
What record did you try it on?
Oh,
because I'd be too afraid.
Poor Dean Martin. I was trying to rehabilitate an old Dean Martin. Just went horribly wrong.
Oh no.
It was only $2 from Recordland, so it's okay. But still, just not the B-side.
I just got a cleaning set. Like,
what did you get?
I don't remember the brand, but it has like a static brush. It has like it has like a regular brush. It has a brush specifically for the stylus. It has a liquid for cleaning the stylus specifically, and another one for the vinyl specifically. I find that the one that I use the most is actually the anti-static, because we live in Canada and it gets very staticky in winter here.
It's very true.
It's like your records, they become like magnets for all sorts of like dust and little specks in the air. It literally goes like, it's crazy. You pull it out for 1 second and it comes out like super flaky.
Doubles it's real fun up here. You know, it's all kinds of fun. What about you? Do you just have Groove Roster? Do you do anything with your stylus specific?
I actually use their cleaning fluid too with the little brush. They have everything, just comes in the little kits.
You can get it as a kit. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
stylus cleaning kit, record cleaning kit.
I actually have some right here.
Oh.
Ooh.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy that way. I mean, you know, again, I would love one of the VPIs or Okinoki, but just not in the cards right now. I kept like putting it on a Christmas list, like, please, maybe. So.
Karen, do you guys recommend anything from Gold Rush?
Not specifically. We should. You know, I have the record player I use back here is my great grandparents from 1948, and I got it refurbished. And luckily, the company that refurbished it gave me all the supplies I needed. So I got very, very lucky.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This was hidden in a closet. We didn't know it existed. It was in the back of a closet in my great grandparents' house and hadn't been touched since 1965. So the radio tubes and all still worked. It's a really cool piece of housing.
I love that. If you guys each had to pick one record to take to a desert island, I love the desert island question. It's one of my favorites. And listen to just it for the entire duration. Let's say you're there for a week, because we don't know what the duration is. What record would you pick, Jen?
The one behind me, maybe?
Yeah, I'm pretty good. I think we know which one that's going to be.
Yeah, I would take the Japanese version I'm always talking about, but yeah, I mean, Master of Reality.
Perfect. Yep. Amanda?
I'm bringing my Dream Split 7-inch of Nat King Cole and AC/DC because I already answered this question. And because I could never decide. That's too hard of a question. I don't know. Thin Lizzy Nightlife is probably what I would chose on the spot.
That's a good one. What do you think?
For me, it would be. I have this Japanese edition of Antonio Carlos Jobim, Stoneflower, and it's I listened to that in an audiophile system, and it was heavenly. And if the desert island has an audiophile system, that's for the
I'm going to go out on a limb and say it probably doesn't. It probably has a Crossley, and you're welcome.
Oh no.
Karen, what about you?
Oh, well, if I'm gonna play it on a Crossley, I'll get Abbey Road because I can always replace it with another one later. But I'm a huge Beatles fan. It's really personal for me and my family, and I grew up learning about the music business through studying the Beatles' history. I love how much they changed their sound in such a short period of time. If you think about it, just how few years that was. So that's my favorite of the records.
Love it. I'm gonna say it's because there wasn't did it say single record? One
You
record.
got
Okay.
us.
Yeah, one record. All right. The Alexis on Fire Live at Cops AB. That one. Yeah, it's a 4-disc set, but I'll just take the AB. That's fun. Okay, let's see. If you could get one album pressed to vinyl that hasn't been already, what record would that be? Jen.
You know, it would probably be something from the 90s, but I'm not sure what yet. A bunch of that stuff keeps getting released and re-released.
It's true.
And
You could be the inspiration right now.
I know, but I'm on the spot, and I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
a tough one though.
No.
But it would definitely be something from that time. There was not a lot of vinyl.
Hard questions.
I've got one.
Okay.
I haven't been able to find anywhere except a 7-inch remix single. I loved an artist in the 90s named Poe, who was signed to
Yes.
Atlantic, and I think she got stuck in a weird contract dispute with Atlantic, but that's, so far as I've been able to see on Discogs, it does not exist as a full LP release, and I would really love to have that.
All right. Carmela says amazing. I do not know Poe, so I will look up.
Which
and
one?
we'll-
Karen, do you know which one?
Hello was the first
The
record.
first one?
Yeah.
Because the second one was like a kind of secret record store day under the table release.
Ooh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I'll message you. Yeah, I'll message you
Now
about
that we know that we have it in common, yeah.
it.
That was a formative album for me when I was in high school and very angsty. So,
Yeah.
but no, loved that record.
Yeah.
Amanda, do you have
Sorry.
any hard hitting?
Oh, I was trying to think of one the whole time. I mean, there's definitely a few, but I would have to sit on that for a day.
Yeah.
And then come back at you and be like, oh, this.
I know.
But,
we'll have to follow up on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a few.
Mariana?
I just searched everything I could think of, and there is a version for everything I could think of. So I do listen to a lot of I do love music from before the 90s and after 2000. So that's the era that vinyl galore, right? And I don't listen to a lot of 90s music, so and 90s I think were the ones where it went all to the CDs, right? So there aren't that many vinyls, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's probably a Sahara Hot Nights release or something that I would enjoy that never came out on vinyl.
Because everybody's been talking about the fourth wave of ska that is going to happen post-pandemic, I'm going to go all in and say Real Big Fish, Why Do They Rock So Hard? Need that on an LP right now. I love you, Aaron Barrett. Right. Okay, let's see. What else
I think
we
we
got
only
here?
have one more.
Oh, yeah. Good starting turntable setup you recommend for anyone? Oh, Jet, come on. That's a crazy question.
Well, I maybe have an interesting question to sort of tie into that for Karen. What do you guys like to use for your QC turntables?
That's a great
Ooh, great question. We have 3 in the office. We have our highest end is a Project, really beautiful system. We use that in our listening room, and that's the one that we use to do any kind of direct drive recordings too. We have and then 2 different price point Audio Technicas on the floor. One's direct drive, and we've toyed with whether we should have it Crosley just to listen to what the experience is like for our fans. And this has been a hard thing for people who are new to vinyl, is trying to explain to them the trade-offs, that we can't make a record sound perfect on every single record player. There's so many factors that go into it.
Totally.
That it's figuring out which fans do you really want to impress and appease, and knowing that some of them just aren't going to have good systems for the type of music. So those are we tend to use those three in the factory as the ones we test on. What do you guys use, Jen?
We have Audio Technicas also, yeah, and then we have a VPI.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. Yeah, but for the standardization, the Audio Technica, which I think is a great turntable. I would recommend that to people. I also usually recommend U-turns. I think they're a good starting turntable. You can get something basic and then build on it. So yeah, that's what I would suggest.
Yeah, Project has some great stuff at like different price levels, and you can like change parts of it. Yeah. And their website is very good at like teaching you about the different parts. They're really informative for people who are starting to get into it. So yeah, like even not only on the turntable end, but also on the preamp and the amplification end of things, like they're really good at explaining all of that.
And that's really critical, because I watched at local record stores all across the country when I'm traveling, people come in and try to buy record players, and there still is that snobbery a little bit about, oh, you don't know what a preamp is and that kind of thing. Like, I think as a community, we do a lot better when we are welcoming and explain why these things matter, and why having, a weighted needle and, things like that matter. And if we're more open to educating people, the better the longevity of vinyl is going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's, so many different kinds of records that you need to understand how to utilize the system that you have in order to capitalize and like optimize your listening experience. Like, I'm always telling people that get lip cuts, you're going to need to adjust your tone arm, your anti-skate, to be able to enjoy this record to the maximum capacity. Because if you've got your calibrated to RIAA standards, you're not going to enjoy a lathe cut record to the maximum capacity. So, I mean, it's not about set it and forget it. It's not a microwave. You need to, it's a dynamic system that's grow and change. And if you're playing a flexi, it's not the same as a 180 record. So there's like,
there's the stigma of Crosley, and I was on a panel once, and, we're all like, oof, don't get a Crosley. But I think, if you're starting out and that's what you ended up with, like, at least you're listening to records, and then let people suggest to you something better for them if it becomes something that you like. So, yeah.
I mean, and that feeds directly into Rashid's question, I think. What are our thoughts on the trends of albums that were only ever mastered, produced, or recorded in digital being pressed digital sources? If something is mastered and recorded, does it make sense to press something to vinyl, or is this just a cash grab? We don't really need Taylor Swift on vinyl, do we? Absolutely, we need Taylor Swift on vinyl.
Well,
that's the question.
Yeah, why don't you take that one?
Well, this is something that I love talking about, because it's not only from the technical end of things, but it's also from the philosophical end of things, because I believe that musicians, like, when they make a record, there is a thought in terms of how people are going to be listening to that work, right? And certain works, for instance, I don't know, I'll give an example. Ariana Grande's album, the one that has like
all the bangers on it.
Yeah, that one, like, okay, so that broke the theory that I have that, like, usually music that was made to be enjoyed through streaming services and your neighborhood's mall is usually not, a good vinyl transfer. I mean, technically speaking, if you send to a good mastering engineer, that's going to be, they're probably going to do a good job at it. But in terms of from the very beginning of when you're starting to make the music, it's an entire process, right? I mean, it's like, if you're making this kind of music that doesn't have the limitations of vinyl, like something super bassy and it's super electronic and the bass is super stereo, you know, you're probably thinking about people listening to that on headphones. You're not really thinking about that being heard through through vinyl, you know. So I do see a correlation between like deciding where your music is going to be heard when you're like at the recording stage and mixing stage, even before it even gets to mastering, because a lot of those decisions carry on towards mastering.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like when it gets to the point of mastering, you will have to mono your bass a bit. It will sound a bit more narrow, you know, when you have to send it to get cut to vinyl, right? So yeah, essentially like the way you're making the music has to match. Sorry, the way you're gonna be listening to the music has to match the way the music is made. In a way, that's my perspective. So a lot of the time, like I find that when I listen to vinyl that was made to be listened to in vinyl, like you know Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, like that was made for you to put it on, put your needle, and forget about the world, and then you know, and then flip it, and then forget about the world again. You know, like it was made for that. And then you have these albums, you know, like I don't know, like a Drake release, for example, putting it into vinyl, it would seem odd to me because it's like it was made to be consumed through streaming and uh, and listening it and playing a few tracks and stopping, you know, like listening to it while you go to work or while you're driving your car, you know, like that was the way it was made. So pressing that to vinyl, yeah, it can sound technically good, but the experience of listening to that record would sound disjointed to me. So that's more of that. So there's a bit of a technical aspect, but there's also a philosophical aspect in terms of like listening to re-releases on vinyl for
Yeah,
things that were made to be listened to on MP3.
and I think, you know, Karen can probably speak to this too, but I think a lot of times when bands are putting their release out on vinyl, they don't always expect for how it's going to sound and how it will sound different. I think the expectation there when you're releasing your album on vinyl also needs to sort of be, you need to sort of know what to expect because it's not going to sound the same as your digital will.
This is where it comes back to what's it cut on? Is it lacquer or metal? Because it sounds so different. And we've had some artists come back and want to repress something that was pressed in Europe, you know, 10 years ago and don't tell us that. And so we cut it on lacquer and they had the original on DMM. Yeah. It's going to produce a very different sound. Or if it's a really dynamic record, I mean, on those Crosleys or Vitrolas, right, the needle likely going to jump if you're moving, you know, from real quiet to bass heavy, or all of the dynamics that tend to happen in a lot of the sounds that are made for radio and for digital, where they're cutting out a lot of the middle and it's just high and low end. So that's really tricky for us to explain too to people, is not only to set their expectations, but that the trade-offs that they're going to have to make.
Yeah,
true. And the other thing that we need to address too is that it's always profitable for artists or labels. Sometimes it's a lot of money up front and it's a gamble. You don't know that record's going to sell. Even though Taylor Swift did $8 of Wonderland or whatever, Evergreen, whatever record it was, insert name here. I mean, before she does her entire, like, you don't know how one's going to sell. So, I mean, you can't just say that it's going to be like a crazy cash grab. And I mean, that's just coming from like lathe cutting too, because like I'm opposite of a pressing plant. The more you get with me, you stay the same price because it still takes the same amount of time. You know, pressing plant, you get a cheaper unit price when you have more. That's great, but that's opposite in my land. So, I mean, there's different ways to do vinyl releases as well. It's going to be not necessarily profitable, like a cash grab. Some of those people that are doing releases on vinyl are just as crazy collectors, and that's like their life goal to have their re-released on vinyl, and maybe, you know, it's been cut at half speed to maximize the amount of sound that they're going to get, you know. So I mean, that all comes with like, you know, transitioning being just a collector to like knowing more stuff about the industry. So I mean, great question, but I mean,
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, someone could do like a lathe cut
Mm-hmm.
7 inch to try it out, see, if people want their record
totally.
on vinyl. I mean, yeah, or if you want something to coincide with the digital release, like that could be a better idea than, doing your full run. It could be an exclusive Kickstarter thing, something like that. So, yeah.
I mean, and that's the other thing too. Like we've pushed all these people to doing albums, and I feel like there's a total resurgence back into doing singles, especially during the pandemic. I've done more sevens here than I did last year, and it's really trying to find different parts of the industry to see where they can, maximize profit or maximize the interaction with their audience.
That's something that worries me a little bit about the future of the industry too, is when you've got the digital service providers like Spotify and YouTube and Apple Music really pushing singles and playlisting, right? That's going to make it more difficult for an artist to justify doing albums unless they have the means to get in the studio and do that, right? Or have such an artistic vision for that the album is the answer. But I'm seeing more and more, especially from the major labels, singles and EP strategy, and that is going to impact vinyl certainly.
100%. So I think that's definitely like one of the things that we need to keep our eyeballs on for sure, is like, keeping pressing plants into the 7-inch, mindset, and maybe even, getting the 10-inch molds so that we can all do 10s, because that would be great too. I love 10s.
We just need the record stores, and I'm curious what Amanda thinks about this, to have better displays for 10-inch, because I feel like they get so lost in the shuffle when you're.
They absolutely do. And most of the time when I get a 10-inch release, I put it on the wall. So I can avoid putting it in the bin and binware, and it gets lost in it, even on record store day, especially on record store day. If you file it in alphabetically with the rest, it almost just gets swallowed up.
Yeah. And then people like me swoop in and take all of them because I'm like, ooh, hidden gems. Perfect. Amazing. I love you. I can't wait.
But yes, there should be more 10-inch sections in stores, and it is rare to walk into a store and see like a group of 10 inches on their own, but I'm all for that.
Lenice, mixing mastering for vinylists. Yes. Ha. I mean, everybody should read Lenice's comments, because I mean, legend among legends in our comment sections right now, everybody.
So we have taken all of the questions. So let's close it out with everyone sort of saying what has been the highlight of your work.
I'll go first, and I would say I'm grateful I get opportunities to say this a lot in interviews and things, but getting to create jobs for women in music is the best thing I get to do all day long. 50% of our staff at Gold Rush Vinyl is women, and our internship program is very heavily skewed that way too. And I'm watching, especially our interns as they go off into the world and do their own thing. It's really just like very rewarding for me to kind of be able to create jobs that give us the opportunities to continue that kind of work. I think that's the most special thing I get to do all day.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
That's really awesome. Amanda?
I love records. The highlight of my work is just that I get to do my work. I don't know, man. I love it. I love all of it. I love getting to know. There's a lot of stores I didn't know 6 months ago that I know now. So I think the highlight of this new job is getting to know stores and owners and new customers and collectors and stuff. Just geeking out about music all day long. Works for me.
Great. Marianna?
Best part of my job is when the artist gets back to you and says, "This sounds amazing. Thank you so much." For real, like just, other than people enjoying what they hear, right? Have an artist say that they, that you improved or enhanced or expanded on their work. It's just gratifying enough. And just the process, like doing what I do is just, I forget about the world, when I'm mixing or mastering a track, I forget anything else exists. So I enter the flow state. Yeah.
Robin, what about you?
putting it back on you. I'm still deciding.
Okay. Well, by day, working at Furnace, I think for me, I just love being able to help people visualize and sort of conceptualize their release. So, getting to work with them on what that end goal package is going to look like. You're sort of juggling the look, the release date, the just the whole thing, and that is really rewarding and fun. And when you see it out in the world, and how excited everybody is about it, that's really great. And then on the women in vinyl side, it's making these connections for everybody and bringing all of the women together, creating role models for sort of the next generation of vinyl women. And I think that that's super important. You have to have diversity for innovation, and I think that that's where vinyl's going. So I hope that with Women in Vinyl, we can really create that knowledge, diversity, and demystifying, right?
Yes, totally. I think that through my weird twisty path, the highlight has been, meeting all of the like-minded humans, being brought along by some incredible people that have gone before me and just have been so selfless with their knowledge, and bringing me like crazy. I really didn't understand or know what I was getting into, but I was hell-bent for leather on it. Just priest reference for you there. Yeah. Making what I love to do, being a record weirdo, looking at my job, and kind of the best part has been being able to make records for people that, don't meet minimums, and, their whole goal is to make records, and they just are like, oh, the best thing of my life, I get to hear myself on vinyl. And I mean, when I first learned how to cut records, the first record I cut was my own. And so like my band didn't get to make mine either. And so I got to do that for myself. And I was like, oh man, I get to do this for everybody. This is the fucking best. Like, whoa, if I can do that all day, every day, 7 days a week for the last 2 years, I mean, like, it's awesome. It's the best thing ever. And working with you, Jen, and Jet, and Amanda with Women in Vinyl, and like pushing the envelope that way, I mean, that's an even higher.
Awesome.
Keep it going, hey?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. We will.
Shout out to SoundGirls too. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, SoundGirls, you're awesome. We've recorded this, so we'll get it up online. We'll share all of that information. So yeah, thanks again.
Thanks to everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.